والصلاة والتسليم على سيدنا وإمامنا وحبيبنا محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أيها الإخوة الأحباب، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الإخوة، طيب نكمل بالعربي ولا ننتقل إلى الإنجليزي؟
أصلاً المعلومات كلها بالعربي.
I praise Allah and send prayers and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his family, the righteous companions, and all those that follow him by righteousness until the day of judgment. Today, inshallah, my dear brothers and sisters, we will start with the tafsir of SURAT ABSA, and we'll do it, inshallah, we'll finish it in 3 parts. And to be honest, I'm compressing it to do it in 3 parts, because when I did this previously, 4 or 5. So I'm going to compress it a little bit, but inshallah, we'll try to finish it between today and Sunday and Monday, inshallah. First of all, we start with أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى وما يدريك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى أما من استغنى فأنت له تصدى وما عليك ألا يزكى وأما من جاءك يسعى وهو يخشى فأنت عنه تلهى. عبس وتولى, the famous surah, the famous incident that we all know a little bit about, but inshallah we will get to know in a much deeper way today, bismillah. He, Abasa, he frowned. Who frowned? We will see. He frowned and turned away, because there came to him the blind man. But what would make you perceive that perhaps he might be purified or be reminded, and the remembrance would benefit him? So, he frowned. Who frowned?
Prophet. The Prophet.
Prophet Muhammad frowned. The Prophet or someone else? How about this? Prophet Muhammad. Right. The Prophet frowned. Frowned and turned away. The first question is it the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I feel that you yourselves became a little bit in doubt when I asked you, is it the Prophet ﷺ? Did the Prophet ﷺ do this? What may add to that doubt is the shubuhat that some people would like to spread, in that they say that the Prophet ﷺ cannot be the one indicated by this ayah. For is it the character of the Prophet ﷺ to frown? It is not. So is it the Prophet ﷺ or not? Another proof that they might offer is that it starts out by saying he didn't say the Prophet ﷺ. It said Abasa. Somebody, he frowned. Is it necessarily the Prophet ﷺ? To answer your question and to end the confusion, yes, this is about the Prophet ﷺ, have no doubt about it. And whatever may be going on in your mind of some confusion, inshallah, I will deal with as we go through the tafsir. Abasa wa tawalla. Yes, it started out in the 3rd person. It did not mention the Prophet ﷺ directly. But all you have to do is to move a few steps forward. Abasa wa tawalla. And ja'ahu or to one of the Sahaba? To the Prophet ﷺ. Anytime there is mukhataba, kafir mukhataba in the Quran, it is the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So, the idea is, it's not, is it the Prophet ﷺ or not? The question is, why the transition from ghaiba, from dhamir al-ghaib to dhamir al-mukhatab? This is the question. Okay? And I leave you to answer that, think about it, and then when we get to that ayah, we'll answer it inshallah. This surah is a Makki or a Madani chapter? Makki. Makki and very early on in Makkah also. And you'll see the importance of that inshallah as we go along. As you know, my dear brothers and sisters, in the Quran, when we speak about tafsir al-Quran, there are reasons for revelation. There are many verses that were revealed and there was a specific, authentic reason for revelation. And in this case, of course, there is an authentic reason for revelation, and that is the famous story between the Prophet ﷺ and the blind man. What is the story? The story is that the Prophet ﷺ was performing da'wah with some of the upper echelons of Quraysh, some of the influential of Quraysh, the leaders and the chiefs, the people with power and money and influence and so on. So the Prophet ﷺ was calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another narration, he was speaking to just one. Either one person or a group of them. But in all cases, they are of the most influential of Quraysh. And he's calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At that time, a blind man comes to him asking for guidance. Okay? He came to him, he said, "Arshidni, guide me," something of that nature. While the Prophet ﷺ is performing this da'wah. Now, who is the blind man? Anybody know? The blind man is the most famous blind man in Sirah of the Prophet ﷺ, Abdullah ibn Maktoum. مؤذن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم أليس كذلك؟ The مؤذن of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. He was the blind man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and was seeking guidance. This is important to realize, that he was seeking guidance, not guidance to the deen, guidance in the deen. In other words, he was already a Muslim. When Abdullah ibn Maktoum came to the Prophet ﷺ, in this incident, he's already a Muslim. He's not a kafir. So the first thing we realize in the story is that the Prophet ﷺ is doing da'wah to some of the kuffar, and here is a Muslim coming for a little bit further guidance. The Prophet ﷺ frowned at this point and turned away. Turned away meaning he didn't respond to him. Not that he turned away or he left. He did not respond to him and he continued performing his da'wah. Fine. This is the summary of the story. This is what happened, causing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send these verses as an admonishment for the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And here, please be careful with the vocabulary that you use. I am trying to be careful. I am using the word admonish or reproof. Admonish or reproof. Both have similar meanings, and there are better words to use than rebuke or censure. Rebuke and censure have harsher connotations. But this is ikram raqiq. This is a gentle reprovement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the words reproof or admonishment are better than censure or rebuke. In the end, in the tafsir, you will find the Arabic words itab. Okay? This is usually the word. So I think the best word that itab can be translated as is reproof or admonish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is demolishing the Prophet ﷺ because of what happened here. And I know what goes on in every Muslim's mind, especially those who really love the Prophet ﷺ, and maybe to a certain extent will start to listen to these misconceptions and say, no, that cannot be the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is not like that. It's not of his character. You are correct. It's not of his character. It's not of the character of the Prophet ﷺ at all to do something like this. But now I'm going to take you deeper into the story so that we can look at it in a different way. Your perception, inshallah, will change. Number one, my dear brothers and sisters, don't judge this story with your standards. Judge them with the standards of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Your standards and his are completely different, especially with regards to da'wah. With regards to da'wah, how many people have you called to Islam? How much da'wah have you done in your life? How many times? How many times have you sat with kuffar and you called them to Allah, and you showed them the Quran, and you told them, if you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be saved, and so on? How many times? Do you really, really care if people come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be guided? Well, we all do, inshallah. But do you care as much as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Would you commit suicide? Would you commit suicide if they would not be guided? Please. What commit suicide? I won't even wink. I don't even blink. I don't care less compared to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah Azza wa Jalla tells him, لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. Are you going to kill yourself because they will not believe? فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ إِن لَّمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. باخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ أي قاتل نفسك. In other words, don't kill yourself, O Muhammad, if they will not accept Islam. So now tell me, do you care as much as the Prophet ﷺ about guiding the kuffar? Absolutely not. In addition, do you have the heaven's weight of responsibility of the final religion, the final sharia, to guide people to? Do you have this responsibility on your shoulders? No, not at all. We have none of this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, يَا أَيُّهَا الرَّسُولُ بَلِّغْ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَإِن لَّمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. Allah. What do you think the Prophet's going to do when he hears this? وَإِن لَّمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتَهُ. He's going to run in the da'wah. He's going to do everything in his power to guide people, to spread the message of Islam. And that's why in the end of his life, he tells the Sahaba, he says, Allahumma laqad ballaghت, Allahumma fashhad. Ana hal ballaghت, Allahumma fashhad. His whole life, my brothers and sisters, revolves around his message, around the da'wah. So you can see the zeal of the Prophet ﷺ as he's calling these people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how much he would have loved that they be guided to Islam. So therefore, if someone comes and interrupts him, or if someone comes and interrupts you, it's something completely different. This is number one. The standards, the issue of the standards. Number two, who are these people? Are these any ordinary people? No. They are the upper echelons of Quraysh. They are some of the most important of Quraysh. Who, if they are guided, God willing, maybe all of Quraysh will follow. Or, if we take the narration that this is one person, by the Islam of this one person, who knows? Many people will come to Islam in droves. So through guiding one person, he might have guided tens or hundreds. See how it's becoming more important? The zeal of the Prophet ﷺ. These are very important people that he's calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. who will inshallah help so many to come to Islam, number 2. Number 3, Abdullah ibn Qutub is already a Muslim. I'm doing this da'wah, I happen to be doing this da'wah with the upper echelons of Mecca, of Quraysh. You are a Muslim. You can come to me at any time and ask for guidance. You can come to the Prophet anytime, and the Prophet will, why is he coming now? Right? Clear, brothers and sisters? This is number 3. So that's why, the reason I'm telling you this is because scholars usually look for an excuse for Abdullah ibn Qutub, not for an excuse for the Prophet ﷺ. And I'm giving you the reasons why. Number 3, we said he's a Muslim. He's already a Muslim. He can come at any time. Number 4, he's the relative of the Prophet ﷺ. He is the maternal cousin of Khadija radiallahu anha. Ibn Khal Khadija. So he's a relative. You can come at any time and speak to the Prophet ﷺ and seek da'wah and seek guidance. Why now? This is a very critical time where the Prophet ﷺ is doing his da'wah. Despite all of that, now you understand why the Prophet ﷺ frowned. And despite all of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still admonishes him. That means the Prophet ﷺ is on a different level. Completely different level. The same Prophet ﷺ whom Allah Azza wa Jalla is admonishing in these verses is the one about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are at the highest level of character. And if you analyze that ayah linguistically, you'll find there are several expressions that give more certainty. Just to give it more certainty, that you are truly upon the highest level of character, of the most refined character. In fact, the most refined character and most refined human being that walked this earth is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For that reason, Allah Azza wa Jalla is admonishing him for something that he seems completely justified in doing. You see how this is making more sense now? He's justified, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But as he's the most refined human being to walk the earth, even in such a situation with all of these justifications, don't frown. And give him time and answer the right man. And we shall see why. Clear, brothers? So, now, rather, let's talk about the issue of the admonishment. Okay? Don't look at it that it is something that lowers the status of the Prophet ﷺ. For me, wallahi, when I read these ayahs, it's the opposite. I see the greatness of the Prophet ﷺ. Because if it wasn't for his great character, Allah ﷺ would not admonish him for something small. In other words, if you see me, and I have bad behavior, and I have bad manners, and I have bad character, and you're coming and you are criticizing me, or you are trying to advise me, right? If I have bad character in general, you're not going to come and point out something very small. You're not going to pick something small. You're not going to know where to start, right? A person with bad character, you don't even know where to begin. His lying, or his deceitfulness, or his cheating, or his greed, or his lack of piety, where do you begin, right? But when you have someone perfect in character, the smallest thing stands out. And you may feel you want to correct it. Like a white thumb, right? You find the smallest black spot. But if you're wearing something dark in the first place, you won't be able to catch any dirt on it, right? But if it was white, the slightest speck will be visible and conspicuous. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reproving the Prophet ﷺ, though with all of these justifications, tells you about the amazing level of the character of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is the way you should look at all of the admonishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards His prophets, peace be upon them all. Don't ever feel that it is lowering them in any way. In fact, it is proof of their greatness. It proves that they are paragons of excellence, and especially with regards to character. And it also shows you the greatness and the magnificence of Allah. For who can criticize a prophet other than Allah? So never look at these things this way. Do a rewiring of the circuitry. Now when you read Abasa wa Tawalla, you should feel this is amazing praise for the Prophet ﷺ, not the other way around. Okay? Abasa wa Tawalla and ja'ahu al-A'ma. You said al-A'ma is Abdullah ibn Maktoum. He was a blind man. He was coming, seeking guidance from the Prophet ﷺ. Did you think about the transition from Ra'ib to al-Mukhataba? Any ideas? Well, let me help you. Actually, both opposite opinions exist. The more popular opinion is that it is talatuf al-itab. It is actually a softening of the admonishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not refer to him directly. So he referred to him in a third person. Abasa wa Tawalla. And this is part of the adab that we as du'at, as scholars of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as practicing Muslims, should perform when we are trying to correct or criticize. So instead of saying, oh, this da'iyah or that, or this scholar or that, instead of mentioning it by name, just mention the action. Abasa wa Tawalla. The action was this. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, when he wanted to criticize something, he would say, مَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ يَفْعَلُونَ كَذَا وَكَذَا وَكَذَا. And he knows who they are. He would say, why do some people do this and this? He knows who they are and he can speak to them directly. But he refers to the action. He refers to it in general. So this is the first opinion. That it is a softening of the admonishment. You say, Abasa wa Tawalla bi al-ghaib, Damir al-ghaib. The opposite opinion exists, and this is the opinion of Ibn Atiyya al-Andalusi, the famous professor. He called it mubalagha fil atab. He saw that it is the other way around. That it is a more severe admonishment when he refers to it in the third person and he doesn't refer to him directly. And if you think about it, you can actually see both sides. It's kind of straight in one way or another. And he calls it, he says, وَفِيهِ بَعْضُ إِعْرَاض قد يكون فيه بعض إعراض عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. If it was that, then it would be an example of al-jazaa min jinsi al-amal. As the Prophet ﷺ أعرض عن الأعمى, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أعرض عنه صلى الله عليه وسلم. But this is maybe a difficult opinion to accept. The popular opinion is that it is actually تلطف في العتاب. And this is why it was in the third person, a softening of the admonishment or the reproof. Okay, and جاءه الأعمى. Why did he say الأعمى? And جاءه الأعمى. That's just stating the obvious.
You see guidance. So you're like, he's like blind. Doesn't have to.
Right. So in other words, you should take into consideration this man's handicap, right? That he is blind. Therefore, you should look after him. Correct. This is why Allah Azza wa Jalla called him al-A'ma. Even though, from a strictly Islamic point of view, we don't use these descriptions to refer to people, right? Unless, as al-Muhaddithin say, unless it is strictly a description and there is no ghiba in it. You don't intend to put down the person in any way. So the Muhaddithin, yes, they used to refer to al-A'mash and al-A'raj, no problem, as a description. But in general, we try to avoid such descriptions because, as you know, we are weak in faith, we are weak in practice. Maybe there is ghiba in our heart. That's why I'm calling him the short one. Oh, yeah, you know, Ahmad, the short one, right? Can you guarantee that when you say the short one, there's no ghiba in what you're saying? You cannot guarantee. So it's better not to use these things. But the Muhaddithin, subhanAllah, they're on a different level. That's why Imam al-Bukhari himself, whose job it was to criticize people and call this man truthful and call this man a liar, says, I hope I will meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I have never ever performed ghiba. SubhanAllah. What kind of hearts, purified hearts are these? A man whose job it was to criticize people says, I know I wasn't doing it out of ghiba. Right? So that's why we don't use these terms. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accentuating that He is blind. Therefore, He has an excuse. He has a handicap. The standard by which you treat Him should be different than the standard by which you treat others. This is one. Number two, as He is blind, there's a good chance He had no idea what the Prophet was doing. Came to the Prophet, he doesn't know who he's making da'wah to. He doesn't know who these are. Upper echelons, Utbah ibn Rabi'a, Shayba ibn Rabi'a, Umayya ibn Khalaf. He doesn't know. Maybe he doesn't know their voices. He's not, or it's not clear, right? What's going on? So he doesn't know. So give him an excuse, right? So this is another reason. And جاءه الأعمى. Now, at the same time, this shows us the importance of taking care of the weak, looking after the weak in the society. This is an Islamic principle, a vitally important Islamic principle, that we are to look after the weak. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ made looking after the weak a gauge, get this, a gauge for the success and the glory of the Ummah. SubhanAllah. Relating the glory of the Ummah to the status of the weak. This is what the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith when he said, "Ubghuni du'afa." Bring me the weak ones. Bring them to me. From the very beginning of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he took care of the weak. He looked after the weak. He had a special relationship with the weak. And he did not enter Hilf al-Fudul except in order to defend the rights of the weak. And this is why he said in this hadith, "Ubghuni du'afa, innama turzaquna wa tunsaruna bidu'afaikum." The weak ones in the Ummah are the gauge. Look at their state, look at their condition. If the Ummah is taking care of its weak, it will be in a glorious state. If they have abandoned the weak, as all of the nations of the earth have done, then they will not be in a glorious state. This is a gauge. Imagine, is there any religion other than Islam that will make the status of the weak the gauge of its success? No other religion, no other system. And this is part of what we learn, and we will come to the lessons that we learn from the incident of Abasa. This is not just some isolated incident. If this is just some isolated incident where we are to learn that you are supposed to help the blind man, or you are supposed to help the weak, or you are supposed to do da'wah, it's not that simple. We will get to the lesson. It's much deeper than that, my dear brothers and sisters. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us this story. Imagine Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, and he was still a kafir. He's passing by some of the weak and the downtrodden slaves, Suhaib and Salman and Ammar, right? All slaves. But even though they are slaves in terms of the social strata, they are the best of the Ummah. And the best in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Abu Sufyan is passing by them, and they said, Wallahi, ما أخذت سيوف الله من عنق عدو الله ما أخذها. They said this to Abu Sufyan before he became a Muslim. Imagine. Who defended Abu Sufyan? Of course, this is a serious statement. ما أخذت سيوف الله من عنق عدو الله ما أخذها. In other words, this is an enemy of Allah. Basically, they said that the swords of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have not taken their share of the neck of the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they mean Abu Sufyan. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu defended Abu Sufyan. So he said to them, "Woe to you, you are saying this to the old man of Quraysh and their chief. You are saying this to the chief of Quraysh." So he went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet ﷺ, guess which side he takes? He says, "Did you anger them, O Abu Bakr? هل أغضبتهم؟ لئن أغضبتهم لقد أغضبت ربك." This is an authentic hadith. You're looking at me in amazement. This is an authentic hadith. This is not a weak hadith. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells Abu Bakr, if you angered them, you have angered Allah. He defended the weak and the downtrodden, even though they said what they said to Abu Sufyan. And even though Abu Bakr couldn't accept it. But the Prophet ﷺ tells him, لَإِنْ أَغْضَبْتَمْ لَقَدْ أَغْضَبْتَ رَبَّكَ. So he went back to them. Did Abu Bakr, did he have arrogance? Or did he say, I'm not going to talk to them again, or they caused me problems, or I'm not going to seek them out? He went to them to apologize. He said, did I anger you, my dear brothers? They said, no, my brother, you did not anger us. This is the way they dealt with each other, right? But the idea, the main thing that I would like to direct your attention to in this story is the status of the weak, the status of the downtrodden in Islam. The way Islam raises their status, raises their level. In another narration, which is a weak narration, because it is on the authority of Al-Hasan al-Basri, who did not meet Umar ibn al-Khattab, yet he is mentioning Umar, a story about Umar. And Al-Hasan al-Basri was known for Tabriz, so this specific narration is not authentic, but we mentioned four istinas just to benefit from the story. And by the way, it is a story that is often mentioned, even though it is weak, Wallahu a'lam. And this is during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, when some of these upper echelons, the influential, who accepted Islam late, okay, around Fatah Makkah, they call them Aslamat al-Fatah, those who accepted Islam later on in the history. So, such as in the conquest of Makkah, such as Suhaib ibn Amr and Abu Sufyan and Al-Harith ibn Hisham and so on. So they came and they were seeking permission to enter the room of the house of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So Umar ibn al-Khattab did not give permission to them. He started giving permission to Bilal and to Suhaib and to Salman and these types. So they could not believe it. What is this? The slaves are entering before us. These people, the lowest of levels in the society, these people are entering before us, and we are who we are. We could not accept it. And they are just thinking, of course, from a dunya perspective. They didn't think that maybe in Al-Akhirah, they would be the last to enter Jannah, and these slaves would be the first. It's not about your social status. It's about your piety. It's about your status with Allah So obviously this, they saw this as an audacious action. They could not accept it. So Abu Sufyan said, Wallahi, I cannot believe that such a day will come where these types of people are entering and we are sitting and he is not even giving us attention. So Suhail ibn Amr interjects and Al-Hasan al-Basri says, يا له من رجل ما كان أعقل. How intelligent was and insightful was this man Suhail ibn Amr. He says the following. He says, I see that you are angry. He's telling his own friends. I see that you are angry. Be angry at yourselves. فَاقْتَضُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِكُمْ. Because those people were called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they answered immediately. And we were called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we did not answer immediately. And then he said to them, don't bother about such issues. Let us go out for the jihad. And then he went out and he said, oh Allah, grant us shahada. And he went to Ash-Sham. So he's telling them, don't look at these small things, these small issues. Don't be concerned about things like this. Look further ahead. Look at where you're going to be later on. Do something for your akhirah. Don't look at the tip of your nose. Again, it shows you the way the Muslims looked at the weak and the downtrodden, as opposed to the others. عبس وتولى أن جاءه الأعمى. So one of the reasons the Prophet ﷺ is being admonished is because a man is blind and he is handicapped and maybe he didn't know what is happening with you and you could have taken that into consideration. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. And what would make you perceive, O Muhammad, that perhaps he might be purified? وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. In other words, isn't it enough of an incentive to give him attention that inshaAllah he will also be guided and he will be purified? This is another thing that we have to keep in mind. As he is blind, neither did he know what is happening, nor did he see the frowning of the Prophet ﷺ. He did not see the frowning of the Prophet ﷺ. Yet Allah is admonishing him. It would have been a little bit harsher if the frowning of the Prophet ﷺ was visible to the person in front of him. But here it was not, he was a blind man. So he didn't even see it. And yet Allah is admonishing him. Just to show you to what extent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfecting the character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's why Shaykh Qutub says something beautiful. He says, it tells you how difficult this issue is, that it takes Allah azza wa jalla to admonish His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about it. That it takes Allah to admonish who? His own Prophet, whom He said about that He is perfect in character, and yet He is admonishing him about this. It just goes to show you how difficult this issue about which the Prophet ﷺ is being admonished in. It is really difficult. Put yourself in that situation. But again, with his standards, with his goals, with his responsibility, what else would you have done? You probably would have shunned him away. Maybe you would have grabbed him and threw him out. The Prophet ﷺ didn't even speak. He just frowned. It just bothered him. It's quite understandable. But Allah Azza wa Jal is taking him to another level. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. Something that we may understand from this is the following. That you should not ever perceive that a person becoming guided or coming to Islam is something that is distant or far away. The furthest people from Islam accepted Islam, maybe at one point or another. The furthest people. وَمَا يُدْرِكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. You don't know. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu himself was an enemy of Islam. Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu. These heroes of Islam. Khalid ibn al-Walid used to perform jihad against the Muslims. Maybe with this type of thinking, we would think these people will never become guided. They will never accept Islam. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. You never ever know. The way I try to deal with it myself when this happens, and I start thinking to myself, he's not going to become Muslim, no way. Or he seems too far. So I imagine him praying, doing salah. That he's already accepted Islam and he's praying. You never know. The worst of the enemies of Islam accepted Islam. How do scholars explain these verses? Two possible meanings. One of them is that tazkiyah means purification from sins. Purification from sins. So, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ أَوْ يَذَّكَّرُ فَتَنْفَعُهُ. It's similar to the concept of تخلية قبل التحريم. You know تخلية قبل التحريم? I'm not talking about the sweets that we eat during Ramadan. تخلية or تزكية, first purify yourself of sins. Stop committing sins. Remove those bad habits. Then at-tahriyah, which is the stage of doing what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, performing obedience, performing righteous good deeds, and so on. This may be what is meant by these verses. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ أَن يَتَطَهَّرَ مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ أَوْ يَذَّكَّرَ. This is after فَتَنْفَعُهُ. This is one possibility. The other possibility that Mufassirun mentioned is that at-tazkiyah is at a higher level. Zakatun nafs. So, وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ, which is كَمَالُ التَّذَكُّرِ. A higher level than tadakkur. So, there may indeed happen tazkiyah here. وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّىٰ. Or if it doesn't come up to that level, أَوْ يَذَّكَّرَ فَتَنْفَعُهُ الذِّكْرَىٰ. So here it would be that the tazkiyah is being reminded completely, as in, and inshallah you've experienced this, examples where you attended some talk or a khutbah or a reminder and you were truly touched and you were truly you truly remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It really moved you. This would be tazkiyah. This would be an example of tazkiyah. Or if it doesn't go that high, أو يذكر تنفعه الذكرى. Or at least he might be reminded by an ayah, by a hadith, by something that you say that will bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the two possibilities. There's another important point and possibly a lesson from these two verses. I'm just racing against time. And that is the importance of giving da'wah to Muslims as well as giving da'wah to non-Muslims. So Abdullah ibn Qutub is a Muslim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is admonishing the Prophet not only because he's blind, but also because he was distracted from him, as in the ayahs as they will come. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَىٰ وَهُوَ يَخْشَىٰ فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَّىٰ. So there are two reasons the Prophet is being admonished. The first, that this is a blind man, this is a handicap, we should take that into consideration. Number two, that he was distracted from the Prophet ﷺ. فأنت عنه تلهى. Why? A person who sought you out, even if he wasn't a'ma. This is a delicate point, brothers. Even if he wasn't blind. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى وَهُوَ يَخْشَى فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَى. A person came and sought you out specifically and needed help from you. فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَى. He was distracted. So, this points to the importance of doing da'wah to Muslims as well as to non-Muslims. In this situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admonished him. He could have. Maybe what could have been said is that these are kuffar. He's already a Muslim. So these people are more important to do hidayah to or to do da'wah to. Even the Muslims deserve your time and your exhortation and your reminder. Shows you the importance of doing da'wah to the Muslim ummah as well as to the kuffar. وَمَا يُدْرِكَ لَعَلَّهُ يَزَّكَّى أَوْ يَذَّكَّرُ فَتَنْفَعَهُ الذِّكْرَى أَمَّا مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى. As for the one who turned away, فَأَنْتَ لَهُ تَصَدَّى. This is the problem. These people turned away. Because what may be going through many of your minds is that, well, is there any problem in going after the influential people and calling them to Islam? Because if I am able to guide the influential will bring along with them hundreds of people. Any problem with that? No problem at all. Seek out the influential. Go after the influential. Go after the stars. No problem. But with one condition. If they have turned away several times, or you have tried several times, and they are just not accepting Islam, stop wasting your time. Then, these verses apply to you also. Is that clear? So the issue is not the prohibition of going after the influential, as Imam Al-Alusi says. Not the fact that you are going after the influential. The fact that they have turned away maybe more than once and not accepted your da'wah, and you're still going after them. And how many economics majors here? Economics? How many have heard of opportunity cost? I think that was the phrase. Long time ago. Opportunity cost? No? Opportunity cost, talking about the chances that you missed. These are opportunities that you missed. When you did da'wah to this person twice and 3 times and 4 times and 5 times and they are not accepting, guess what? You missed 5 opportunities to call someone else to Islam or why accept Islam. You lost out on other opportunities. So this is why أَمَّا مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى هَؤُلَاء اسْتَغْنُوا. You have already called them to Allah. The Prophet ﷺ already called them to Allah. If it was the first time, maybe Allah would not have sent this admonishment. But they've already been called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala several times. They heard the Quran. They know about your da'wah. They are turning away. أَمَّا مَنِ اسْتَغْنَى فَأَنْتَ لَهُ تَصَدَّى. And tasaddi, as you know, in the Arabic language usually gives the name of confrontation. It's almost like they are going one way and you are coming and you are standing in front of them and you are stopping them. فَأَنْتَ لَهُ تَصَدَّى. Leave them. They don't want Islam. Islam doesn't need them. They need Islam. Fine. You think that inshallah they will bring many people to Islam? Maybe they won't. This is according to your understanding. Maybe they won't. Try once, try twice. But if you see they are insisting on turning away, leave them. فَأَنْتَ لَهُ تَصَدَّى. This was the major problem. The proof that there is no problem going after the influential is that the Prophet ﷺ later on, in the later period of Medina, he called on the influential. problem going after the influential, just should not be something being done consistently where other people who could benefit from you lose out. This is the major problem. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى. And by the way, these verses, they hurt the ego of these upper echelons of Quraysh. These people would love to say that Muhammad cares about our Islam. Muhammad wants us to become Muslim because we are important, because we are influential, because we are the real people around here. We are the most famous of our tribes, and we are the chiefs. So the Quran comes and lowers them. There's no blame upon you if they do not accept, or if they do not become purified. Leave them. You don't need them. The Ummah doesn't need them. But these verses, they hurt the arrogance of Quraysh. They are used to people putting them on a pedestal, and these verses are placing them where they should be, because the standard is piety, not wealth, not gender, not color, not nationality. Unfortunately, until now, the Ummah is suffering from the disease of nationalism. Until now. Don't tell me we don't have it. Wallahi, we have it. You as a Sudanese, you think you are the best. We as Syrians, we think we're the best. The Malays think they're the best. The Europeans think they're the best. We all think they're the best. We are the best. We have the disease of nationalism. We have the rotten disease that the Prophet said, دَعُوهَا فَإِنَّهَا مُنْتِنَةٌ. Until now, we have this disease. And until we get rid of this disease, this ummah will not become united again. You are my brother and you are closer to me than a person who shares my nationality if you are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than they are. That's the standard. The standard is taqwa. The standard is faith and iman. Not nationality. Not where you were born. Who cares where you were born? Did you choose where you were born? I did not choose where I was born. I don't know about you. But I didn't choose. So why do you give some importance to something you didn't choose over something you actively chose? And you give preference to? It's ridiculous when you think about it. The Arab movements, the Qawmiya and the nationalist movement that existed during the early 20th century, it's ridiculous when you think about it. Giving importance to something which you did not even choose. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. The brotherhood is the brotherhood of faith. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى وَهُوَ يَخْشَى أَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَّى. So here is the crux of the problem. Here is someone who came, جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى. Who knows what obstacles he had to get over to come to you? He's a blind man. Maybe he came from far away. And by the way, he's the same blind man who asked the Prophet ﷺ for an allowance not to pray in Jama'ah. He said the masjid is far away, and there may be lizards and beasts on the way, and it's scary for him, and he's a blind man. And the Prophet ﷺ did not answer. And then as he's going away, Jibreel comes with the wahy, and he calls him back, and he says, do you hear the call? He says, yes. He says, answer the call. And he's a blind man. And this is one of the most important pieces of evidence that scholars who talk about the obligation of praying in Jama'ah use. If anybody had an excuse not to attend the Jama'ah, it is this blind man, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if you hear the call, answer it. وَأَمَّا مَنْ جَاءَكَ يَسْعَى وَهُوَ يَخْشَى أَنْتَ وَهُوَ يَخْشَى. And he fears. He's fearful. He's fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did you just hear what I just recited? What I just mentioned? وَهُوَ يَخْشَى. Whose testimony is this? Whose testimony?
calling the blind man.
This is Allah's testimony. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testifying to the piety of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Ya Allah. Allah is saying, وَهُوَ يَخْشَى. Allah is confirming to you that Abdullah ibn Maktoum has khashya. Allah. Can you imagine what would the situation of Abdullah ibn Maktoum be every time he recites these verses? Is it too far-fetched to say that every time he recites these verses that his eyes tear? Is it far-fetched? Not at all. Maybe every time he recites, or maybe this was his favorite surah out of the whole Quran. These are the verses that were revealed for his sake. Aisha radiallahu anha also was proud of the verses of Surah An-Nur that proved her innocence. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِّنكُمْ. Right? Similarly here, this is a chapter that was revealed for the sake of this man. And in addition to that, Allah is testifying, وَهُوَ يَخْشَى. What more does he want? Khalas, he achieved everything he needs to achieve. Allah has testified, this is a pious man. This man has khashya. وَهُوَ يَخْشَى. How fortunate he is. Unfortunately, we don't have such a guarantee. فَأَنْتَ عَنْهُ تَلَهَّى. Then you are distracted from him. This is the problem. Why were you distracted from the one who came to you? Why are you going after the one turning away and stopping the one coming to you? You see? So this is another reason for the admonishment. The handicap is one. The second one is, don't turn away someone coming to you, especially if it is because you are preoccupied with someone who already turned away from you and gave you his back. Clear? These verses, let us just go a few lessons and we will finish, inshallah. These verses, my dear brothers and sisters, are one of the most clear proofs that this Quran was not written by Muhammad. Tell me, Bible, if the Prophet was the author of the Quran by Allah, please use your brains. Tell the kuffar who are doing da'wah to this. Use your brain. Would Muhammad, who authored this Quran, in your opinion, would he admonish himself or write a divine admonishment for himself? That's why some of the Sahaba said if there were any verses that the Prophet ﷺ would have concealed, if he was going to conceal anything, of course he won't. But hypothetically, if he was going to conceal any verses, he would have concealed Abasa wa Tawalla. Right? Or the verses of about the abortion, the abrogation of the abortion, with the Zayd ibn Khalid and Zaynab bin Jahsh. This is another example. These are the types of verses the Prophet ﷺ would have left out. If he was the author, would he write this? When you are an author, especially if you are trying to prove to people that you are a messenger, do you insult yourself or do you raise your status to show that you are sent by God? He is trying to prove to people that he is sent by God, but he's saying that God is admonishing him. This can only be divine. This can only be from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's amazing, my brothers and sisters, the timing of these verses. The timing of these verses, as we said, it's a Meccan chapter. It came early on, right? As it came Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Muslim ummah, don't use these worldly standards. Stop giving importance to standards such as wealth and authority and influence. Stop looking at these worldly standards. These are not the standards by which Muslims judge. Let them be whoever they may be. Early on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching them this. Early on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ, leave them. Leave influential. You want the influential because they will definitely have some positive effect on the Muslim Ummah, right? Leave them alone. Depend on Allah. Trust in Allah. An amazing lesson in the importance of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If these verses came in the end of the Medina period, where Islam had become strong, and Allah was telling the Prophet ﷺ, leave them, we don't need them. The religion is already strong. It makes perfect sense. Right? But coming in the very beginning, when they need these people, when the Muslims are tortured, when the Muslims are oppressed, when the Muslims don't want to stay in Mecca, when the Muslims were sent by the Prophet ﷺ to Abyssinia in the first migration, and then to Medina in the second migration, in the weakest of states, Allah is telling His Prophet ﷺ and teaching the Ummah, leave them. We don't need them. You don't need them. You don't need the influential. You don't need the powerful. You only need Allah. Trust in Allah. I am confident that the Ummah has not understood this lesson from these verses. And that's why we continue to depend on our worldly standard. Oh, but he's very influential. Oh, but he's great. Oh, but he has power. Oh, but he has money. Oh, but he can do this and this. Trust in Allah. Fine. You call them once to Allah. They don't want. Leave. Work on something else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will suffice you. Allah is enough. Allah is teaching them this from the very beginning. All people are the same in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The standard by which to compare is taqwa, is knowledge, not these worldly standards that you are using. Let me give you a practical example in our life of not heeding the verses of Allah. Have you heard of the nation of Islam?
America?
Yes, the one in the US. You've heard of it. What? Elijah Muhammad. Okay. Nation of Islam technically took some aspects of Islam. By the way, they are all black. Actually, they preach an ideology of black supremacy, which is obviously contrary to Islamic teachings. Okay? But they took some things in Islam and they called themselves Nation of Islam. And their whole purpose was what? Rising against the white man in the States during the times where there was black-white segregation. Can you imagine in the 60s a bathroom that says whites and another bathroom that says blacks and dogs? This is how it was in the States. That's how it was. So these people, in order to find a way to bring the masses together and to fight against this white supremacy, they borrowed some things. They saw the power and the strength of Islam, and they called themselves Nation of Islam, and they talked about, 5 prayers, but not actual 5 prayers like ours. That's why I tell you, technically they're not Muslims. Anyway, no Muslim says, black supremacy, and blacks are the best, and blacks are above whites, and so on. All of this is garbage, right? But this is the movement that Malcolm X and Hajj Malik al-Shabbaz, right? Used to be Malcolm X, they were Hajj Malik al-Shabbaz. This is the movement that he was part of, right? Later on, he accepted Islam is a man by the name of Louis Farrakhan. Have you heard of Louis Farrakhan? No. Louis Farrakhan likes to play. So in his talks, he will quote from the Quran, then he will quote from the Bible, then he'll quote from the Torah, then he'll quote from something else. It's a big cocktail for him. Okay? So many Muslims said to themselves, subhanAllah, if we guide Louis Farrakhan, his whole nation will follow him. We're talking about thousands of people. Okay? And I know them, I have been with them. They are the type that if someone accepts Islam, or if their leader accepts Islam, there's a good possibility they will all accept Islam. And black Muslims in the States, they tell you that they are already quite close. Because they are called Nation of Islam, because they know about the 5 prayers. So they're already quite close. There are just a few things that need fixing. You know, things that need to be rectified, but they're not that big. So they're already quite close. So many Muslims have been trying to guide Louis Farrakhan in the States for years. And many times, one after another, rumors would come out, Allah Akbar, Louis Farrakhan accepted Islam. The whole nation is going to accept Islam, and it turns out to be a rumor. And again, so they just keep trying back and forth, back and forth. I think if there is any modern example, it is this example. That Abasa teaches us not to do. You call Louis Farrakhan to Islam once, twice, 3 times. This simply is not acceptable. Leave him. Leave him. Enough. You are missing out on many other opportunities to guide Muslims and maybe to guide other Muslims. This is what we learn from Abasa. So go after the influential people, I have no problem. Go after them, but with that condition. Just do it once or twice. After that, that's enough. The guidance is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not in your hand. It is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let me tell you, something that I fell into before I realized this lesson from these verses. I fell into the same mistake. But I hope I have a little bit of an excuse. I was calling a person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at work. Obviously, we're very busy at work, but we found time to talk about Islam, so I was working on him. And he was already very close because he did not believe that Isa alayhi salam is God. He believed he's a prophet. And he had respect for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I thought, subhanAllah, he's almost ready. I worked on him for 4 years. And this man is just not accepting Islam. Another person of the same nationality in the company I was working in, but not in my department. So I didn't used to see him much. But when I used to see him, I used to think to myself, maybe I'll say a few words, and then I thought, I don't have time. And he looks far away. I don't think he's going to accept it. So I never said anything to him once. One fine day, after a few years, he comes to me, and he has accepted Islam. Not the person I was giving dawah to, the other guy. The other guy I did not say a word to. And wallahi, when he told me his story, I said, is that easy? He said, that easy. I think he found a tape with some information on Islam, he listened to it, and he accepted Islam. And I've been working for 4 years on that guy, and they are from the same nationality, they know each other. And the other guy accepted Islam. وما يدريك لعله يزكى أو يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. You don't know. Guidance is not in your hand. Guidance is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who guides. Try. Give that person an opportunity at least. You're giving da'wah all the time to this one because you think he's close. Give him a chance. Say a few words. Who knows? Maybe Allah will bless your words and maybe they will become Muslim. Therefore, Abdullah ibn Maktoum, after the story, while they say Prophet ﷺ, after this, maybe he look at him anymore because Allah Azza wa Jal admonished him because of Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Is that the case? The opposite. The Prophet ﷺ only brought him closer. So Abdullah ibn Maktoum, this great man, was the mu'addin of the Prophet ﷺ. And though he was a blind man, the Prophet ﷺ left him behind in Medina several times when he would go out for a battle. He entrusted Medina to Abdullah ibn Maktoum. By the way, this is according to Ahl Medina. Ahl Iraq, they don't call him Abdullah, they call him Amr. There's some difference of opinion. Amr ibn Maktoum or Abdullah ibn Maktoum. Either way, he used to leave him in Medina. He was the mu'addin of the Prophet ﷺ, a great companion. He even participated in some of the battles of the Prophet ﷺ, and according to some scholars of history, he died in a battle. Blind man dying in a battle? How? He wasn't fighting, obviously, but he went and he held the flag of the Muslims. He said, if I cannot fight, at least let me hold the flag of the Muslims. Allah. Can you imagine, my dear brothers and sisters, a blind man? In fact, don't think of a blind man. Think of me and you, standing, right, holding the flag, hearing the sounds of the swords and the shouts of the jihad. That is scary enough. Much less that you are hearing all of this and you are blind and you cannot see it. And he is standing and he is holding it. This is Abdullah ibn Maktoum, whom Allah Azza wa Jal tells us was fearful. وَهُوَ يَخْشَى فَأَتَعَبْتَ لَهَا. This is the story of Abasa. These are a few of the lessons of Abasa, and there are so many. And ultimately, I want to conclude with this final lesson. This story, my dear brothers and sisters, is a social revolution. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching Prophet Muhammad and the Muslim Ummah not to give weight to the standards, the human standard of wealth, and the human standard of influence and power that exists until today. Until today, what is the standard? Who you are, how much you have in your bank account, and who you know. Right? Anything else? Nobody cares. Taqwa, ilm, Quran, nobody cares. This is what matters today. Until today. So imagine if these verses were revealed today, when you talk about these standards today, it is similar to a revolution. When you are teaching people, don't look at these things. These are not the standards by which we judge. If you talk about these standards being introduced into a tribal, desert, nomadic society like the society of Quraysh 14 centuries ago, it is no less than a social revolution. By all means, a social revolution. Talking about these things in such a society, in such a time, this is a revolution. That's what it was. That's what the Prophet ﷺ was bringing to them. A social revolution. We don't judge people this way. We do not classify people this way. We do not segregate people based on their class, which exists, as you know, until today, as in India and maybe some other societies, where people are segregated by class. These are the upper classes, these are the lower classes, and so on and so forth. We don't have this in Islam. We don't judge based on color, or nationality, or race, or gender. We judge by taqwa, by piety, by God consciousness. This is what means something. And this is one of the most important lessons of Abasa. Forgive me for taking a little bit longer, but there's so much to say and there's so little time. I hope we can finish Abasa. I'm not sure if we can. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are there any questions or comments? All is clear? Anything confusing? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت